is up, guys? This video is geared towards getting into coding. So what I'm going to do is start exporting things and basically showing you what I do when I bring this to life. My plan for it is to use WordPress as the main content management system for this site. It's a single page at this point, so it's not going to be very verbose in terms of development, but I want to make it easy for the owner of the product, Jamie, here to update content to her liking, because when we're done with it, we kind of like our clients to be able to make changes at their leisure, because that's just a nice to have. Typically, when I start a project, I have a few pre-existing formulas, or I don't know what you want to call it. I don't know, plugins and stuff I use. I'll talk you through them as I go. I already have a working site folder. In that folder, I'm using MAMP if you don't already use it. If you're on Windows, you can use XAMPP or something similar to that. What it essentially does is creates a MySQL, Apache, and something else server on your computer, so you can serve PHP files and have it, work correctly, all with the database and everything else. So with that said, you still need WordPress to get started. So if you head to WordPress/download, again, that's a .org. Make sure it's .org, not .com. You'll need to download the latest version. Here it's 4.7 at the time of this video. So I just downloaded it. Let me grab it. And I'll unpack that and put the contents in this alias I have on my desktop right now, which is just to the sites root folder, which is where I keep all my sites as I'm working locally. So we'll go back to that folder. And as you can see inside, I'm also working with Dropbox, so you'll see these icons to the right. I like to version everything with Dropbox. Just makes it super easy. Typically on a new theme in WordPress, if you're familiar with it, you can go about it many different ways. Create a child theme based off of something already installed, like the WordPress defaults, or create something completely from scratch, which is usually the route I go. I don't really like the idea of depending on another theme. It just seems like something that could break in the long term. So especially if WordPress is releasing new themes every year, eventually, say 3 or 4 years from now, they'll get rid of 2013 like they did here, or 14. So that's just like, why deal with that? So to solve that problem, I use a starter theme called Underscores. I think this is the URL. I could be wrong. Yep, there it is. So it essentially kind of creates a theme based off what you call it. You can even include some pre-existing settings, which are classified in your style sheet file. This gives people who are in the WordPress admin an idea of what the theme is, who created it, their URL, and a description. And you can use Sass if you want. I, for some reason, always click this, but I end up just scrapping all the Sass that's included and starting from scratch myself. So you'll see me do that this time as well. For this project, we'll call it H2O. Theme slug, we'll do the same thing. Author, we'll do Andy 11. Couple of creatives as my agency. This is a theme for H2O supplements. Well, we'll do drink. H2O drink supplement. I don't know. This can be anything. So what it does is it actually uses this based on what you name it. So make sure you name it something you like. It creates a lot of methods and functions based on that name inside the theme. It also adds all these things, which you can read through on your own time if you want to check it out. I'll link to this in the description of this video as well. So underscores is pretty well maintained, if you can see all these people, so that's why I kind of use it. It's just kind of a good starting point. So what it does is generates that theme, and you download it again, just like we did WordPress. And I unzip that, and inside is the base theme files you would use. So from here, I'm gonna grab that folder, go back to our desktop, go into WP content themes, and just paste it in. If we were to go to localhost 888, which is the MAMP kind of base starting point, and type H2O, we're gonna get an error because we don't, well, okay, actually we won't, but you'll still need to have some configuration going forward. So we'll start from here. We need a database is the thing. So to do that, you can do that from MAMP if you open the start page here. Let me kill this. This might be distracting you guys. So from this page, which is what usually launches when you launch MAMP, you want to get into PHP MyAdmin. I have a list of databases I work with over here, which don't relate to this project at all. So I'll just create a new one for this project. It's H2O. Okay, that should be pretty simple. That's pretty much all you need to do in that interface. So from here, WordPress will do this for you, or you can do it manually. I've done it both ways, but for safety's sake, I'll just do it through here to make it easier for you guys to follow along. With MAMP, there's a default username and password. You can find that right here on that launch page. It's set to root. I'm fairly certain you can change it if you want to, but I just keep it as is because I'm the only one on my computer and I don't really care. So we'll do root, password's root, localhost. You can change the table prefix. I've done that for security reasons at some points. For this installation, I'm probably going to leave it as is because it kind of gets in the way later when we migrate data from the localhost to a actual server. It's not a big deal, but it's just something, an extra step to take when you're on your development journey. So when you submit this, it should connect. It says, all right, you made it through this part of that installation. You can now communicate with your database. If you're ready, time to run the install. So this is that famous 5-minute install or whatever they call it. So from here, I'm just gonna name it H2O drink, username. I'm gonna make this my own because I like to use the same one on all my installs. So sue me. Yes, it's weak. Confirm that. I'll do any. So if you're confused, this is coming from a web crunch video. This is my actual working agency who's doing this project. So if you see me type this email or mention this alias, that's why. Yeah. So this is, I mean, you can, since it's local, it does not matter, but I'm going to just discourage search engines for now, just for the safety of Google being a friend of mine. All right, so now we log in and now we have WordPress installed. Pretty simple, right? So if you remember that theme we installed in our themes folder, WP content themes, H2O is right there. Currently it's not active, so to activate that, you can go to appearance themes and you'll see H2O here. We need a screenshot for it like these, but that's not a big deal. We'll get to that, and we'll activate that. And that means our theme is live. Look how great it looks. So that's what I like about a starter theme. It kind of, it's just bones. It's basically nothing, but it works, it functions. your pages, everything links. Essentially, that's getting a WordPress install going. Okay, so now that that's set up, I need to configure a few things that I like to do when working with WordPress on my own. I'm using Sublime Text here. So what I'll do is actually grab this folder, the theme folder, and open it in Sublime Text. I do a bit of housekeeping here to get things kind of the way I like them. Like I said a few minutes ago, some styles come defined in the underscores theme. I pretty much start over. One thing I do keep is this stuff, just for the sake of not having to remember it to write it. So what I do is delete all of these folders. In fact, to make this easier, I'm going to go into the Finder and do it that way. So I delete everything except for that style CSS file, or SCSS. And then inside this one, sorry, my mouse is like a noisy one. Yeah, inside this one, I get rid of all this junk. I'll keep that because I'm still going to use normalize, and get rid of that. Get rid of that. Text domain is important for language. So if you have multiple languages on your site, or if you need it to render different languages, WordPress helps you by default to do that. So make sure, and a lot of your functions, say in your functions PHP, there's this thing. This is the text domain. So for example, on our register nav menus here, you want to add that. It helps translate. So something to keep in mind. We'll keep the license. We'll keep this. Same with this, that, and that. One thing to note, I use Gulp to basically run a local host that auto updates stuff when I do styling and stuff like that, or it minimizes or minifies JavaScript stuff and all that stuff. In doing that, it compresses my CSS into a compressed state, so it's not so many lines of code. This little exclamation point on this comment means that this won't get minified. So if you're ever seeing that and wondering why that's there, that's on purpose. Underscores is smart enough to do that from the start, because they were already, if you tick that SAS option, that's going to be there. I'm going to copy this. In my projects, I create a global assets folder. I'm going to create a folder called, let me double check what it would be. I'll get to this point. I just want to make sure. Yeah, it's SAS. So I'll create a SAS folder. I'll create a JS folder. I'll create a images folder. And inside our JS folder, I have two instances. So there's a dev, which is what I use locally, and then a dist is what I call it, which is stuff I actually serve to the server. Inside the dev folder is stuff that isn't like minimized, or I keep saying minimized, minified, and it gets sent to the dist folder as minified files. Or if I ever use vendor JS that's already minified, or just stuff I don't want to tweak on my own, I just throw it in the dist folder and then link it through the functions file, which is where you're supposed to link stuff in WordPress, so it enqueues properly. I'll get to that, so don't worry. Inside SAS, I'm going to create a new style.scss file, like we just had here, and I'll paste that back in. And then I'm going to delete this file, or folder. Oh, well, this isn't supposed to save. Okay, so now we have this here. It's going to, once it runs, since we use Gulp, it will compile to this Sass or style.css file. So all this code will get replaced here in a second when I run Gulp and make sure it's all working. Cool. So we have that set up. We can get rid of, I think I'm going to get rid of these folders, the JS folder here. I don't know if that's hard to see for you guys. Sorry if it is. I know by deleting that, WordPress, or this theme in particular, links to them in this file, the functions PHP file right here. So I'm actually going to remove those as well. Also, by default, there's customizer editions. I don't know if you've ever used the WordPress customizer, but it's this thing. If you ever click customize and do stuff in here, that's cool. I don't like it, so I don't even use it, or I don't tell my clients to use it, mainly because it's just not, I don't know, it's not a real graceful way to edit things. Rather than that, I give them the options like on a page-by-page basis or in an actual custom post type kind of scenario. By default, this theme includes that kind of functionality. It's basically just some JS and stuff to use to customize these things, which you can set yourself. I don't like to use it, like I said, so I actually just don't include it in my functions file. But essentially the underscores theme is there to kind of help you optimize some stuff that you wouldn't normally get out of a basic WordPress theme. Same with the Jetpack plugin. If you ever used it, there's a few quirks to using it, and this sets, for instance, infinite scroll up if you want to get that going on your blog or something like that. I don't know that I'll do that on this one. I don't think we'll need it. But for now, I'll keep that code. I'm just not going to include it in my functions file. So we'll get rid of that. Can always add it back. Same with custom header. I don't use that. It takes too much stuff to load those. So, you can set, that's another setting from the customize menu you can set, which we won't do, but I'm just showing you where it's stemming from. We might use the sidebar thing. I'll keep that handy. I think the rest is probably pretty good. I don't need this. No custom background for me. So here's the text domain thing I was talking about too. It loads a languages folder, which is right here, which you can configure if you really want to get things going. Here you can say for specific things, you can set specific translations and stuff like that. Here there's variables. Anyway, getting deep. From there, at this point is when I usually set up my Gulp file. If you've never used Gulp, I do have a blog post about it on my blog, WebCrunch. I'll link to that below in the description as well. It takes a bit of getting used to, and it's all JavaScript based, but it's something really worth getting into. If you're not a fan of it, definitely recommend an app called CodeKit, which I have here. I used to use it, don't so much anymore because I've turned to Gulp and kind of use Node and that kind of environment. It's definitely more command line based. Which I have iTerm here. I'm going to show you how I use it in a second. I don't know. I feel like I have more control over things, and it's really easy to make configuration settings or updates, stuff like that. Especially in this case, when I have this snippet file ready, it's really easy to get up and going. Sure, there's initial upkeep to get this file or a file like this up to spec. Once you have it to where you like it, it's pretty easy to get going. So you can use, I mean, do what you want in your own process, but mine typically stems from this way. I have these set of predefined Gulp components and tasks in this file. These will live in a file called gulp.js in my project. So our gulp file.js. So you add that at the root of your theme folder. In that, I paste all this code. I'll walk you through it real quick. I'm not going to share the code, mainly because this is a real live project, but I will walk you through it. So maybe you guys, if you want to copy it, you certainly can. I don't care. So in a gulp file, there are these components, which are node modules, which we need to install still. I have not done. But if you go to npm, what's it called? I think just npm. Let me see. Yeah, so you can find all these packages on this site. So it's npmjs.com. So if you were to search for gulp, it's right here. There's all these, documentation and stuff for each of these packages. So here I have gulp Sass, since I like to use Sass for my CSS. Gulp auto prefixer, that's useful for when I compile my Sass. It auto prefixes things that need it. So if you ever have like I don't know, like a linear gradient, for instance, you need all these, definitions. I'm not writing this right, but like, if you've seen like the WebKit prefix or the Firefox, which is Moz, stuff like that, rather than having to remember to write those, this plugin's pretty useful. I can't remember what Gulp Newer kind of does. I think it's a comparison between files. I don't know that I make use of it, to be honest, but I do have it there. Oh, it's for, okay, yeah. I compile, you can optimize your images on the fly too. So Gulp Newer kind of recognizes which is the newer of the files and outputs those specifically. So I have a task here for my images that in this folder, a new folder will get generated when I run this script called originals. In that, I'll put any real images that I want to get optimized. And when they're ran, they go through this optimization queue and go through a destination, which is I set as a variable, which up here is just assets and images. So they end up back up in the images folder. It's pretty technical, but it's not too bad once you get used to it. Source maps is useful since my CSS gets compressed when it's compiled. Source maps tells me basically what file my Sass lives in. With Sass, I like to use partials. In fact, I'll go and create a folder called partials. It has an underscore at the beginning. An underscore in general with Sass means it won't get compiled as is, so a new file won't be created, but rather they'll be stitched together if you include them or import them. For now, I just have that folder. I'll get to where the stuff inside that folder imports into this file, and then it'll be all set to go. Okay, so continuing on, Gulp ImageMen is again back. That's what's running in this image task. It's optimizing our images as we feed them through. Browser sync is useful for if you create a style update or whatever you want, in this case, like a JavaScript or style or HTML update. The browser will refresh based on seeing, it watches for code changes basically, which is what Gulp kind of is. It kind of just is a task runner that you can assign tasks to do as you're developing. So here I use a method called watch. What it does is looks inside these directories at all the files ending in, like, say, SCSS, And this would be the one for the partials directory, which is SCSS. So on any change, it runs that browser sync and then reloads the browser. Same is true for my JavaScript files and if images are optimized. You can set this to watch pretty much anything, but doing so or setting a bunch of watching here decreases the speed of the whole compressing engine behind the scenes, so be careful with it. These two, Gulp, Concat, and Uglifier, are for our JavaScript task. So this one essentially takes the input from our dev folder, which I showed you earlier. I created dev and dist in JavaScript folder. All the files in the dev folder get watched, and then from there are concatenated into a single app.min JavaScript. Concat comes from this plugin here. And then from there it goes to this Uglify, which is like a lint kind of thing, or a cleaner upper tool for your JavaScript. And then gets output to the dist folder, which is found here. So once that runs, we'll have any file you create in the dev folder will get concatenated and created into this app.min.js folder. So we'll have a global JavaScript file to make use of. And then I think below that are just some variables I have set up. If you used any of these in your project, you'll want to definitely get Gulp watch, Gulp itself, of course. Prefixer is really useful. Sass, if you're a fan of Sass, they do have a less version too if you're into that. But yeah, each new project I end up with a file like this, which is why I created that assets folder before. You might have wondered why I started creating that immediately, but that's just kind of my process. One thing I didn't mention is the browser sync. You can actually set a root URL, so when it fires, it'll load this. In our case, since we created our theme at H2O, we're going to add that. And again, I'm using MAMP, so that's going to make it all work. So when it initially launches, it'll run all these tasks, and you'll see a new browser open with this. It'll actually be 3000 in the port, but this is where it pulls from. A lot of technical stuff here, but you'll see what happens in a second when I get it launched. So you could run each of these separately if you typed what we called it here. So if I just ran gulp.js, it would run this one, which is cool. But typically I don't run them independently. I run everything at once. So that's what this task is, which is default. And your default runs by just typing gulp in the command line inside your project. When you run gulp, this array of tasks get fired. You can add as many as you want here. You'll notice that these names match up with my tasks. So all these get run when I simply type gulp in my command line. But before any of this can work, we actually need to go out and download these packages. To do that, I need to do that from the command line. I've also saved a script in my snippets to do this pretty easily for me as well. So I keep a folder called gulp and then the npm install. If you've ever used npm, which is what this is kind of stemming from, this is how I do it. This set of files, or set of, a script, are all these here in line. So if you want to copy this, you can pause the video and see those and install those the same way. What you'll want to do is go to the command line, go inside your project. So I think I have an alias set up to go inside my sites folder. So I'm currently in this folder, which is where I keep all my sites. I'm going to cd into H2O. So we're there now. And then you need to make sure you're in your theme directory. So if we do cd which CD stands for change directory if you're new to this. We need to go in the WP content folder and themes, and then I think we called it just H2O again. Now we are here, we're inside our theme. So inside this theme is where you want to run this script, since you have your Gulp file and everything else there for the project. So at this point, I will actually just copy and paste this in, but essentially if you look, it is npm install, and then I do all of those packages as you see here with a space in between each. And then this flag is called save dev, which means it saves it locally. It creates a package.json file. Actually, we can do that real quick if we do npm init at the start of a project. It'll go through this kind of walkthrough to get things set up. I mean, you can do whatever you want here. I just kind of enter through everything because it's not a huge deal. But if you're working in a team, I recommend filling this part out. To use npm, I should state, you want to have Node installed. So if you do Node, go to nodejs.org. Just install the latest version for your operating system. It should tell you no matter what operating system you're on, it'll figure it out for you, and you just download that. Then you can use npm. So if you're running into issues with that, that's why. So we'll just initialize this. Okay, cool. Yes. If you can't see that, hopefully you can. So now that we have that initialized, the save dev feature will actually be in this file called package.json or JSON. There'll be like a dev instance that will, or development that will come up, and then it'll list all these packages. The reason for doing that is because if you were to version control your project, you wouldn't want to version your node modules which get installed. I'll just run this and show you. It's a huge folder of a lot of files that get installed. So here we're running it. It creates, I'll go back to my project. There'll be a new folder called node modules that comes up once it's installed. Inside that is all these dependencies for these plugins to run. Basically, the reason you do this save dev thing, I'm trying to get to the point, is when you version control it, if you use Git or something similar, you don't want to have every developer who's working on the project have to download this massive list of files. So what they do is when they get the project, they have this package.json file. They can run npm install, and it'll go out and fetch all of these automatically. So they don't even have to really do much. It's kind of a neat feature working in teams. So here, as I just stated, the dev dependencies were added. So it's strictly development environment. So you wouldn't put this in your production environment because you don't need to. Everything gets compressed and exported the way we need it to work. So we'll wait till that's done. Looks like it is. Okay, so at this point, my hope, if our Gulp file is set up correctly, we can just run Gulp, and we'll get a new window. Oh, we have an error somewhere. Image source not defined. Let me see here. It is defined. Well, what's funny is it did still run. I think for now, I honestly don't make much use of this because I use a lot of SVGs in my projects now. Or there's just basic image Optimum app, which is super useful. You just drag and drop your images there and use them as you want. That said, for now. I'm going to comment this out. Same with these. Make sure to end this with the semicolon. And then we'll actually kill our server here with Control C on a Mac. So it's finished right now. I'm going to run Gulp again. Okay, I did something wrong. Oh, I need to pull this out. Okay, let's try one more time. Gulp. Still getting some errors. Image source. Okay, I need to comment this out too. Okay. So we'll Control C again, Gulp again. There we go. So as you can see, we're running localhost 3000 and then our theme directory or site directory H2O. We have our working WordPress theme here. You notice the styles changed from before because we deleted all those style sheets, but we'll add stuff back in to kind of get things reset. But at this point, I think I'm going to stop the video. We got WordPress installed. We set up our development environment. One thing I can do is initialize this with Git. Maybe I'll do that real quick. I'm going to open up. I'm just going to kill the server for now. So Git init. If you're new to Git, there's a whole post on it I have. I'll link to it as well. There's some things to know. I'll say that. So don't fear if you're not sure. You don't have to use Git if you're the only one working on the project. I like to for the sake of being able to roll back if I ever need to or work on a new feature. It's useful. So to start an initial Git, you just do Git init. So Git isn't the same as GitHub. So this is all local. So what I'll first do is actually going to create a git ignore file. So it's going to be a .git ignore. In this file, you can add folders you don't want to version. For sure, the main one I don't is node modules, which we just installed. You just type it like that and it should find it and know not to mess with that one. Do that before you commit anything, because otherwise it will commit and you'll have to go back and re-edit that, and it'll be a pain in the ass to version. So at this point I can do initial commit. So I'm just going to add everything right now. So that staged everything. If you do git status, all the greens are going to add. We're going to add to our version control. I mean, I could have done git ignore too, or these two, but oh well. Next, you'll do git commit, and then you can add a message. I'll just call it an initial commit. Cool. So that works locally. I'll end up creating a repository on, I use Bitbucket. A lot of people use GitHub, but Bitbucket lets you create private repos for free, and that's pretty cool in my opinion. To do that, you have to add a remote repository. I'll get to where I'll do that, but right now I'm going to keep it locally synced with Git because it's not a huge deal since I'm the only one developing this one. So with that said, I think I'm going to stop the video there.